think vibrato is the hardest thing to teach because, like, just imagine you walked into a culture where nobody had ever tasted lobster. It doesn't taste like chicken. And so you want to describe the taste of lobster. Just using that because it's peculiar and very characteristic. Could you? Or would you say, well, if you just taste it, then you'll know? And I think vibrato and also spiccato are kind of like that. And one of the reasons, I was trying to think, why do I think that? And I think what sticks with me is that it's a skill where you train the muscles to do certain things very carefully, but in the end you let them go. So the control, hi Diane, the control is, and we'll come back to this, but the control is in how you hear it and in the mind. Once you've trained the muscles to do what you want them to do in a correct way. And I think I hate it when I have a student who comes to me and says, and I say, well, what's your background with your vibrato? And they say, oh, my teacher said just do it. And I feel like, oh, okay, let's start over. And they're usually very willing, because they want to know. And I use the word correct, and I think that when I use that word, I'm not saying there's a one-size-fits-all. I really don't think so, but I think that correct can be defined as it functions, and it functions well in such a way that it doesn't prevent other things from functioning. So if you think about correct as another sort of a synonym for functional and for also enabling other skills to be built, and this goes back to the workshop that I did before about the cumulative nature of organizing skills. That's the way I want to use it. It's so personal, isn't it? I mean, when you think about, like, listen, when you're doing your own playing or you're listening to someone whose artistry you admire, and you realize that the nuance and the coloration, the range of expression in it is as volatile and as personal and as spontaneous as our own use of pitch and pacing in words. And that becomes very personal too, when two people speak alike. I have colleagues whom I admire enormously, and I'm very serious when I say this, who say, only arm vibrato. And then I've heard, only wrist vibrato. And then I heard what I wanted to hear, which is a combination of arm and wrist, and even a little vibrancy in the finger. That from Eric Rosenbluth. God bless him. And I'm just throwing that in now because I want you to know that when I'm talking about this, that's where I'm coming from. Okay, but my concern with starting to train arm from the beginning is that I think it tends to make players tight in the wrist because they inactivate this and they go for this. Now, the ability to do that, like if you want to vibrate octaves or chords or anything that takes a little more mass, you have to have the thrust from here, but you don't want to train the lock here, and you don't want to develop a tight player. So those are just things that I like to keep in the mind. So let's talk about what actually happens. See, I use my bow. Imagine a straight line ceiling, okay? I don't like to do this with this bow. Hang on a second. Something a little more expendable, if you'll pardon me for that. Okay. So here's this line. Do you mind holding one end of that, Johnny? I would be so grateful. Thank you. We start balancing on the pitch. We bend it downward. We come back to the same spot. Back to the same spot as many times as we choose, and then we balance on the pitch again. Thank you. Why? Because the ear perceives pitch that way. And I can do you a really horrendous demonstration called Killer Bees of when that doesn't happen. And you'll understand immediately what I'm talking about, but that training the ear to keep returning to the same pitch is essential. So if we have, that's a mild vibrato. has killer beaks, okay? So this is very simply, you want to return to the same pitch ceiling. And that's a matter as much, maybe more, of your training than it is of just physical training. Now, those are sort of thoughts that I wanted to assemble about vibrato before talking about how I like to approach teaching. You want to come up here? There's plenty of seats.
There's room here too.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Not at all, no problem. Are there any comments or questions there, or should we say wait until, I have an open forum sort of built into the end of it?
I would love at some point, the comments about arm versus wrist.
Yeah,
I feel like when I look around the orchestra, I see more violins using just arm, and I'd be curious at some point if anybody has observations about the difference between violin and viola, cello, and everything.
well, no, I think, I can't speak to someone else's way of going, but I would love to hear other people's things. Maybe we could throw that open after going through all of this at the end, and let's hold that, because that's a great consideration.
Do you find finger as a component too?
Well,
Or-
okay, let me tell you about this. So my first teacher at age 20 is David Cerrone, who wasn't known for being a very nice guy, right? And he's, oh, you have to be able to do this. So he says, here, you have to hold this. Now, just try this. Now, bend your little finger. Go ahead. If you can do it, you're better than I. You can do it. You have a much longer little finger than I did too. So then he said, well, okay, talk to it. Pull it along a table and talk to it. This didn't work either. But what, I think what he was trying to do was to develop some flexibility in these, and they do function and they do work. And we'll go to their, the give in the last joint, which is taken by the hand pulling it away from the note, but it's still pinned down in the note. Something's got to give. It's going to be that knuckle. Okay, so per se, no, but as a component, yeah. So I wouldn't sit down to a bowl of salt, but I like a little salt in my food, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think if you're playing fast running notes and you want a little vibrancy, there's just a little shimmer in the hand, and I don't even know where it's going to come from. But I do think that ability to give is what I'm really talking about. Okay? So not per se, no.
Okay.
Shall we talk about how to get this across? I think there need to be some conditions met in the student before doing this. I like to think that the left hand can be positioned pretty correctly, meaning functionally, that there's ease in the hand, that it's not a lot of tension. Now, I grant you, there are going to be some kids who are going to be tense from the moment they're born to the moment they're gone, and that's just how it is. But we do try to mitigate against this. So I'm just talking kind of ideally speaking. And I think it needs to be a preliminary condition for a student who wants to learn vibrato that all the exercises you're going to get, and there's a slew of them, are going to be done with a prerequisite ease in the left hand. I think it was George Nykrug who said vibrato should be therapeutic. I heard this from some of his students, and I've always thought about that, and I think he was really telling us something very important, and that is, even if a student hasn't discovered ease yet, maybe they can learn it from this, and then take it back into some of the other things where they maybe have approached things in a more confrontational way. So I like to write that. I like them to have a notebook, and I like 2 pages reserved, 2 big pages for vibrato exercises. So and I like it near the front so they can always find it, because this is a long-term project for me. I don't think this happens fast, and I don't want it to. I mean, if some kids get it all really fast, that's fine, but that's not usually the case. I would like their intonation to be reasonably secure. So here we have left hand position, we have these vibrato pages, and we have at the top of them this admonition, everything has to be done with an easy left hand. So you can point to that, keep reminding. Beginning third position experience, actually this is a wonderful confluence of needs because you can learn third position without even knowing you're learning third position while you're doing your vibrato exercises, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, you can play in third position, like what's the big deal? And it's such a great anchor place because if you touch the base of the wrist to the fiddle, you don't want to do this with a more advanced student, but just for when they're beginning this, it tells them right where it is, and it blocks this from doing the pump handle thing. So ultimately, you want to take the motion of the vibrato and focus it here, because that's where it's going to roll the pitch or bend the pitch. And when it's out here, you might see a lot of vibrato, but you're not going to hear much because the finger is not actually delivering it. The other thing is, I think of these exercises as cumulative. So it isn't like you do one thing 1 week and then another thing. You keep doing. I mean, how many people do you know walking down the street doing this? I hope not too many. But we need that. Like dancers take class, you know, to keep the, they call it synovial fluid in production in their joints, to keep all joints limber, flexible. They take class daily. So we need to keep convincing our wrist to produce lots and lots of good lubrication. So we have to start training this. And as all of these exercises are really designed to teach a good, again, using that word, correct motion, and they don't all address the same thing. But if they are cumulative, then there's a whole lot of this going on for a period of months or weeks, depending, again, on the kid. So, there's a lot of beautiful decoration in this room, not too many open wall spaces. But if you can find an open wall space,
Door jams.
I would like to show you. Yeah, door jams work great. Come on. Out of your seats. Let's do it. So I've got one over here. Wall knocking. If your kid has a dog at home, they can see if they can make the dog bark. So put your arm flush against the wall. You're going to have to stand probably at a 45-degree angle to it. I'm so glad everybody's using their left hand. This is.
I had to think about it.
Almost. Okay, and keep this flush against the wall and just do this. Now, you may start at some point to say, hey, I feel that inside my arm. It's a little tiring, and that's when you stop. And I think this is where you say, okay, you can do this multi-times a day, but this isn't like gym where you say to the teacher, I'm tired, it hurts, and they say, good, do more. Don't do that, because these are small tissues. They're delicate, and nobody else uses them for this. So just build them up to this a little bit. And again, I hope everybody was nice and loose, because you don't want to be doing this from a tight point of view. So that's the first one. Second one is like if you have a piano or a table in your studio, I'm going to use this thing. You know those plastic Easter eggs? Or a wadded up clean tissue. You can put your hand here. There. Oh, thank you. You know me too well. Yeah. Okay. Hold your thumb and just pull the hand up. Imagine you have a wall here and a wall here. So it's like a chute. So you want the motion to be absolutely straight going back. Because what we don't want are circles. Okay, so it's this motion, just up and down. This one is harder than it looks. Most kids end up sort of circling. If you can find a flat space and you want to try it, there, you got it. That's it. That's the motion. Jenny's got it. Jenny's is beautiful.
But you were holding your thumb too.
Yes, you should hold your thumb. And then once you know that someone's not going to go away from the table and do this, you can encourage them. Like if they're bored in school, put their hand under the desk and do this for a while. They can do that. They love that up to you. Just don't get caught. Okay, so that's that's the egg in hand. I hate to tell you this, but I did originally suggest the use of an egg, and the inevitable happened. And I don't do that
Hard-boiled,
anymore.
perhaps?
Yeah. Then, okay, so here we get to the violin. And this is where you find out if parents really love their kids or were just pretending, because this is so obnoxious to listen to. So the first thing is to put the hand as straight here and just go up to fourth position, but no bend, okay? The arm glides. Light, all 4 fingers on the string, light glide, do it on all 4 strings. Nice practice also for crossing strings with the left elbow, by the way. Another thing that kids tend to not know about or care about. So, all of those just straight. Then, does somebody wanna do this?
Make Lynn do it.
Lynn?
She would be like a beginning subject.
Oh, perfect, come on up, Lynn.
That's you, Joe. That's it.
Oh my, you're so tall. Here, can you just unzip this and fold it back? Thanks. So,
Is this your real violin?
this is my real one. Behave yourself. Okay, so you wanna try that?
Oh,
So all 4 fingers on your A string and just lightly glide up and down.
With the arm.
Yeah, don't break the wrist though. So the wrist stays straight. That's it. So it's really coming from here, okay? I'm sorry.
Oh, I can see, oh, yes.
All right, good. Now, assuming you have a beautiful bow hold, which I know you do,
Mm-hmm.
you take this bow, and I want you to bow, but without relation, so don't just, but rather like totally unrelated. So best thing to do is start the left hand first.
Okay. You're also assuming I know how to hold a violin, right?
Well, beautiful. Over here and help you a little.
What's the reason for it being uncoordinated?
There you go.
What's the reason for the not being
Because they
coordinated? with the
really
bow?
are discoordinated motions, aren't they? I mean, you don't change your bow every time you make a.
Right.
Yeah, so it is a coordination training.
So I'm actually holding the string down.
No, just lightly.
Oh, lightly.
Just stay lightly on this. Now you can see why parents might want to ask you to play in the garage or the basement or whatever. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. So just use the full bow and don't press it down. Don't hold it down. Just lightly. I want to see daylight underneath. Good. Let's go to the G string. So just go over here. So oh, even worse. Okay, good. All right. Good. Now let's go to the wrist one. So you're already up there. That's your third position. And I would like you to just bend your wrist back. So pretend I'm the puppeteer, okay? And I've glued you on here, and I've got a string. And when I pull, leading with this, pull that back, but you're Velcroed on here. So you're gonna go past your thumb now.
So I'm gonna lead here,
Yeah,
but leave my thumb in place.
that's right. And you're not gonna use the bow. Here. Okay, now don't reach bye-bye with the fingers.
The fingers are moving then? when
No,
you
they
do
should
that
be
just now?
passive. They should be passive. That's what I'm working with on
Okay,
that now.
I just couldn't see what.
I'm sorry,
I wasn't sure.
can you back up a couple steps? Better?
Sure.
Okay. So I've tied on,
Uh-huh.
and I'm gonna pull it, and you don't wanna grip here. Let that, it could touch, it could brush by, but it doesn't grip.
Uh-huh.
Okay, here we go. That's better. So you wanna really move from here. Good. And you see, that takes some training.
Yeah.
And then at the bow. This is beautiful. Good job. There it is. Okay, good job.
Maria,
Congratulations, thank you.
do you have, how do you describe that you're pointing to from here? Do you call it knuckles, the hand, the wrist?
Oh, that's interesting. I would say, I would call this the first base knuckle. I like to refer to these as the base knuckles, like as the base of the knuckles, okay? And so I would say, from here, but I would make an issue with a kid and say, look, I just fastened my string. I'm the puppeteer here. I just fastened my string on you here, so we're connected. And they usually will play with this game. If they're too old and sophisticated, then they're in trouble, but most kids are pretty amenable to a little bit of game playing. And one of the, just this is an aside, sometimes if the imagery seems a little silly to them, it's easy to point out, yeah, this seems silly to you, but you'll never forget. You will remember this. So I'm not doing it to entertain you, I'm doing it so you will remember. And they're usually good about that.
And sorry, all four fingers were down for that?
Yeah, but not down in the sense
They're
of
like more
holding
like
down.
harmonics.
They're yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
they're just sitting on the surface of
Okay.
the string. Again, to encourage a sense of ease. You don't wanna create friction later, because friction would have nothing to do with the real motion. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, now, I used to say pitching baseballs, but that was a dumb idea, so. Oh, okay, so let's play a little game. I'm sure that imagination is rife in this room. So I'm gonna take my ball of air, pet ball of air. Can you throw your ball of air a little? Okay, pick a partner. Someone near you. You too. You too. Somebody be my partner. You too.
You can join us later.
Here. You guys, okay, we're good. Susie and I are gonna demonstrate. So, I've got, can you feel your ball of air? Let's throw them to each other, okay? Good. Oh, wait a minute, you have to warn me.
How many does she have?
Okay, let's do it again. Okay. So, you wanna try that? I just wanna ask you a question after.
You wanna throw
We
first?
each have a ball and.
Oh, yeah, or you can arrange, you can organize it any way you want.
I'm not sure what we're.
Yeah, we never did that. All right, now the question I have for you is, in somewhere in your secret little heart, can you actually feel it's there? Okay, good, that's the imagination. So here is this ball of air, and you've made friends with it, you can play with it. The last thing you want to do is squash it, right? Okay, so now you take the violin, and you ask the student to take his nice little ball of air and play catch with his ears, sort of. So lob it gently, back and forth. This is where, if you have instruments out, this would be useful, because just feeling, this one's not so easy to do either. Sometimes what I see is there's a circle, and you have to, I'm sorry, sit for a second. So you need to let them know that that's not, this is really taking the egg in hand, all right, and translating it to accommodate the fact that we play diagonally across the instrument. The instrument's there, you cannot play there because the instrument's there, so you have to play somehow across it, and aiming that ball of air toward the ear.
So you move your whole hand, your thumb?
You're parked here.
Oh, you're
You're
still
Velcroed.
parked.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're Velcroed here. So anything now that's in third position is going to be predicated on being parked, Velcroed here. Okay? And most of the training of the motion is going to happen in third position, again, because it doesn't permit these things.
And do you do strictly in third position or just where it's like against
get
the
there.
body? Okay.
I'll get there. This is a good question. So, please, we have another season. Don't worry, just come. Joan, do you need another one?
Sure.
Another guide?
Yes, actually.
I have only mine,
I
but
just-
if you wanted to grab one and make a quick copy, if you
Okay, I
said your
just need
copier
one
was
page.
quick.
Yep. Is anybody else missing?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, so Diane, let's do this together, okay? So, you're touching here, right?
So, right there?
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. You're gonna go past your thumb. So this is the same thing you were doing, with the wrist glides. But
Oh,
now,
okay.
except now you're not holding down any nose.
Oh,
Take your finger, you know where your ear is, right?
yeah, that one's,
That's right. So you wanna go, as if that's like the shoot is
Okay,
there.
goes-
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Somewhat, I mean, not too extreme, yeah. You have to be comfortable, so. And always
Going
putting more
back,
emphasis on
coming
going back.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's really, what you know, you're bending the pitch downward.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, okay. Would've gotten it.
Now, you don't wanna toss it, you wanna See, that's where I get in trouble with the baseballs, because they're
Yeah.
just no edges on any of these exercises, no edges.
So it doesn't stop on
So
either
go past
side?
your thumb. No, not at all, it's
I
continuous.
see, yeah, yeah.
She said, make sure you
And
go
that's
past
just,
the back.
that's a
motion.
funny image thing. How are you doing that? You got it, that's good, just no edges.
Oh, so just keep on sort of.
Think of like a wave motion.
Did you
This
do that
kind of-
motion,
Oh, moving I
did you
see.
do that motion on me holding, I just wanna make sure my thumb is.
Ah, relax your arm. Don't hold your nose down.
Getting the thumb is out.
You've got a circle.
And your wrist should be touching this much or?
Well,
Uh,
can you hold the bottom of
Sure,
that right
slow.
now? Okay, so I would, your thumb, whatever, you know, you said.
Your lobby,
normal
yeah,
way.
Quite a lot down.
So make sure that this is quiet. You'll love.
That's what I'm like, I'm just present.
Is it better?
Getting bigger.
And you don't have to do any bye-bye with your fingers, it's all in here.
That feels so good.
It does feel good, doesn't
It
it?
does,
Yeah.
now once my thumb starts relaxing, I
Yeah.
relax in there.
Does this make sense
Does that look good?
to everybody?
Yeah.
It looks fabulous,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
So that was pitching the ball.
that was pitching the ball of air, yeah. When a student is doing this comfortably, it's fun to try seeing if you can get them to hold one finger down now and use the same motion and get a slow pattern. Now, if I knew more about computers, so I got this. If I knew more about like word processing stuff, which I don't, I could have put this into my plan.
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you guys out.
But this is what I wanna show you. See this sort of snake-like thing? Okay, always going back to the same point for the pitch, so we could label out the pitch, starting on the pitch, ending on the pitch. I like to use this pattern, and I mean absolutely this pattern, with 3 pulses. And there's a reason for that. It's the start of training the ear to govern the vibrato, not the hand, the ear or the brain. So even though it's arbitrary, I find it useful to say, no, please really use that pattern. And I think it's the start of some kind of sense of control. So, just gonna take some water, hang on a second. So if we start with anyone want to try this? Where's the ham in here? Got an instrument?
Here.
I'll use dance. Maybe. I can reach, give a bow.
Oh, no.
Charlie,
I
I'm
thought it
bring
was
our
in
photos.
there. I can
Oh! Hang on a second, you can use this one.
Okay.
That's all right. It's a nice strong bow, you'll enjoy this. Especially for something as uncomplicated. Okay, so you should teach the next vibrato workshop, okay? Yeah, that was perfect, yeah. Now, do it on the C string, will you? Do you mind coming up here? I wanna point something out, it's really very good. When this young lady does this, she doesn't touch here at all, and she brushes here, but she does not grip. If somebody does, they end up pivoting, that's where the circle comes from, and it's a real showstopper, because you can move easily when you have only one point of contact. When the minute you have more than one, geometry sets in and begins to determine the planes, and you don't want that to happen. So go ahead, do it again.
On the,
Oh, whatever, you, dealer's choice. Beautiful. fabulous, thank you so much. Good job.
Do you usually start with the second finger? I certainly find for most students that's the easiest.
I always ask them which is their best finger. By then, they've been doing enough of all, well, they haven't done fingers yet, but they usually have a sense of which finger they like the best. But I think you're right, I think it's usually second. For me personally, it's third.
When I let them choose, they always think first finger's going, and then like they
Oh,
just
you know,
think
that's a
one
good
is
point. That's a
gotta be
good
the
point.
easiest, cause I hate putting fourth finger down and
Yeah, and you know, one is probably
the hardest.
the hardest, yeah, that's a good point.
Too
So,
high or too low?
yeah, so, yeah, I think that being, you know, so I do actually, now that I think about it, Jen, you know, I hadn't really thought about everything, but yeah, I do. I think I gravitate toward that. Okay. So I bet you wonder what the stupid story is, right? Well, do you remember what I was saying about using language that might seem infantile for the student's level? This is a pretty good example. So, okay, so just bear with me for a minute. We're going to South Africa, we go down into a diamond mine. We get to the bottom and we are allowed to take one rock back. And in front of us on the ground is a big dirty hunk and a perfectly cut diamond. Which one would you like to take? Do you know? Yeah, okay. Any other diamond people?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're such a good stay for the good time. Okay, anybody for the rock?
Oh, yeah, I like the dirty.
Okay, why?
I don't know.
'Cause then you can make it how you
I like
want
the
it.
way you think.
You can make it how you want it.
Make more diamonds?
You can carve it.
Yeah.
Stacy,
Yeah.
Stacy, yell it loud and clear.
Because you can make it how you want it.
What, and there's
You can form it
probably
how
more
you-
than one of those in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with a little effort. Okay, that's a stupid story. But they don't forget it because I'm asking them to do ear, and really exaggerate, go much farther bending the pitch than anyone would possibly want. And some kids, especially who have a little more refined temperament, only want to do D, because it doesn't sound very good to bend it deeply. But if you think about the pendulum on a clock, actually, the little choker, the weight, if it's put low, makes the swing very wide. If you put it high, it makes the swing very narrow, but it's the same speed. And when people talk about a faster vibrato, I'm not convinced that they don't just mean within some variation, a narrower one. And I think sometimes, you know, we can heighten it and give it extra thrust. I understand that. Intensity, we call it, maybe. But when people are obsessed with making the vibrato faster, they tend to tighten the hand. But if they've developed this sense that they can control the pulse, there are exercises that then can narrow it down and make it faster, and suddenly it lets go and it's really a vibrato. So that's what, so whenever I want something exaggerated, I'll say, just remember the stupid story. And they laugh, but they remember, and then they feel more comfortable with the idea of playing something that's really very unpalatable to listen to. Okay, so that's the reason I have that.
Maria,
Yeah.
on the glides and the exercises up till here, you had what we were calling maybe a harmonic weight. Now in this pulse, are they,
Oh, that's a good question. It's actually holding down a note.
and do you find, I guess I find that that moment when enough weight to sound a note sometimes is a big stumbling block for kids. They get very tense. So do you find that the exercises they've gone through so far, they move very smoothly into this?
You know, that's a really important point, and I think it speaks to this idea of setting up as much as you can a ground rule that everything has to be done from a point of view of ease. And if students have developed that resource in themselves, they can release that. And the other thing is you have to think about like how much weight is really needed to hold down the note. I remember Miss DeLay had this wonderful exercise. She'd say, okay, try playing a note, really press hard, and you get this kind of sound, and then, okay, now not enough weight, and you get something akin to a harmonic if it's one that will yield one, otherwise just a ghostly sort of sound. And then she would say, okay, now just put it in the middle for finger weight, and you'd come out with something resonant that the instrument is responding to. So there are ways to let them experiment a little bit with that. But, I think that's really an important point, you know, that that's a transition spot. I think it's a spot where it is pivotal because, again, they could revert to the circles. What I find with any of these is if it feels to me like something isn't really established well enough to move on, I'll say, okay, we need to back off this, and we'll go and rework whatever it was, again, in the sense of cumulative exercises, until I feel comfortable with it. And usually the truth is, if you tell them that they're gonna work harder and more thoughtfully about it, the next week it's gonna be just fine and you can move forward. And they're proud of themselves. They also learn that focusing their attention like that actually has a good result. So, yeah, so I think that if that seemed, from my point of view, if it seemed that the person couldn't get past that, I would back off. I would say you're not quite ready for this.
And so you're still doing the wall knocking and the egg in hand and the glides
Theoretically,
in
yes.
theory? Yeah, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes they need a little reminder. It's not like they have to do it a lot.
Right.
It's just touch base with this, touch base with this.
Maria,
Mm.
just on this point of doing the real finger at the moment when you wanna add the vibrato, in some telebook a long time ago, I read, the image of, saying, okay, we're gonna put, this is kinda gross, a little wad of, chewed gum on the finger to make it stick. And then you avoid all the business about weight or anything like that, so maybe an image, some comparable.
Some cushioning of
Yeah.
some sense, yeah.
You know, some comparable image, it just says it's gonna stay still now. It's gonna
That's
stay in place
interesting.
without pressing or.
Do you do that too?
No, I was just finding it
Consonants, yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I tell people to think of a magnet
Yeah, yeah.
kind of at the end of the finger,
So it's
So-
just that,
so
That
that
much
so that this
connection.
finger doesn't start to slide around.
well,
but
that's true.
It feels,
Yeah.
so they feel a connection.
That's also a good point where we connect with this idea of the finger that you mentioned, because if you're starting to draw it back, let's see if I can get my other fingers out of the way. It has to give. So that's where that finger comes in, and if it's soft, it will give. If it's gonna do, if it's locked, it's not gonna, everything will be torpedoed, so that works, yeah. Okay, so, once you've got this basic motion going and you've got them committed to the D, E, E, I like to have them do scales in third position. Even kids who aren't familiar with third position, they have the scale book, there are the numbers, they can put in the numbers if they need to. So would be starting on the G string. Now, when you get to the fourth finger, the infamous fourth finger, keep the third down. We borrow this from cellists, I think. And even a beginner will have a fourth finger vibrato, and it's so exciting for them. Etc. Okay? And always that same cut, because it's teaching the ear a couple things. Start on the pitch, revisit the pitch, end on the pitch. So always the ear is focused on the pitch. And that can go on, if you feel like tension happening in the wrist, remind them. There's always this reminding, you know, like any skill, going back and forth, saying, okay, free it up, free it up. And you know what you said, Kathy, you said, oh, this feels good. I hear that. This feels easier. Do you like easy? Yeah, I like easy. Okay, let's go that way. It's a choice. There's nothing inevitable about it. Pulses with rhythms. So, oh shoot. I knew I'd forget something. This has been a cuckoo week. You all know the 2, 3, and 4 note rhythms for practicing, right? Okay. I have this all written out actually on a sheet, and at the bottom I have increasing pulses per bow, and this is the vibrato sheet, and I give this to all my kids. And Joan, I could scan this, and if you wanna send it, if people want it.
Yeah.
I apologize, I knew I would forget something, this was it. But it's okay. So, you can start with the 2-note rhythms, and again, we stay in third position, so you have your, and then, you know, the other one. And then eventually, if they're doing that loosely and not tight, because it really matters, so it's like throw it away, throw it away. And the wonderful thing is it's attached, it's gonna come back. So it always has a recoil feel to it. And then to make the long note, first you'll hear, which is kind of labored and deliberate. So if you can get them to throw it away. And then, and once that feels free enough, after they've done the sequence, you go to the 3-note rhythms, and then let go. Now, it doesn't always work, but very often it does. If the hand is loose, it will work. If it's not loose, back to the drawing board. So that one I love, because it kind of gets your hand going this way, and then suddenly just going, and that's the trick, that's the hard part to convey, because that's that part where it's, you let it go, and it's been trained and it does what it knows how to do. Sorry, wrong hand, but you get the picture, okay? So, yeah, so that's bridging, that's another pivotal point, right there. Then, you know, usually our kids are geniuses, right? So they like, then they like 3-note rhythms, and you can give them all 4 versions of those. It's just the displacement of a long note. And they're getting a lot of exercise with this. Meanwhile, there's something I like to call transferred pulses. Take this, that's one thing you can do, but here's, maybe I should have done this first. Yeah, probably. Parallel scale. So now go to first position and make it look and feel the same way. So here you have the guide of the fiddle holding you, and here you don't. Some children have difficulty with this, and then it's very useful that they could use like a little stretch of wall. Let's see if I can do this safely. No, I can't. Susie, can you be my wall for a minute? Just put your hand up. I bet you've never asked to be a wall before. So I have no work there, and pretty soon they'll figure out, thank you, Susie, that they didn't really need that wall, but it's just a freeing thing, to get the sense of what it feels like to do it without having that worry.
I feel like that's the step that I run into major trouble with all the time. Like kids that are, I think are really getting it, and with against here, and then they do that, whatever you were describing, this thing, all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's good. So I think that also a mirror can be helpful here, because they can see that. It's always really great teaching aids. But that should help address that. So then they do parallel scales, third position to first position, over all 4 strings and back down. So
Can you demonstrate?
yeah, sure. So forth, okay?
Yeah.
And it's another good chance to remind them about keeping the 3rd finger under the 4th finger. Useful. Okay. And then the increasing pulses per bow. And I'm, you know, this is where also telescoping is into a very small space of time. I don't usually give more than one of these, at least these. I mean, the beginning ones I might give like the arm glides or the wrist glides with and without the bow, or without the bow and with the bow at the same time, but not these. These are projects. Crazy exercise. This is a nice one. So you ask them to just draw a slow bow and suddenly throw the hand. It's just the impulse, just to do that. Some of them, again, the more refined types want to produce a vibrato, saying no, 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 no. And you can draw a picture. Again, I can't do this on the computer, but I can do it freehand. There, that about makes a picture of it. Okay? The visual image usually sells here. So, and actually, you might even extend the resolution line so that in fact, you return to quiet. And that, I think, is really useful just to develop that kick, you know, the go, that kind of. and you use the bow, pull, suddenly. So you're using the fact that we love to do the same things. Often as string players, we have to do completely different things, but in this case, we can take advantage. It's, sometimes people say you can pick off a trill with a little bow speed, a little kick in the bow. Well, this is essentially the same impulse. Okay, so that's, at this point, okay. Is anybody missing the first page? I have two of them here.
I have 2 second pages here, I think we just have spares.
You know what? I don't know how we did this, but I don't have a second page, so let's trade.
Here,
Because I can't do this without my
I
pen.
have the first page, so I'm good with that, I'll just, that's an extra. I'm all set with that,
Oh, okay.
because I made an extra.
Very, very. Now, forgive me, again, I had formatting wars with Word and decided Word won. So it's okay. I can accept
You've
that.
got some kind of guide as you go, as you switch it around.
So we've talked about, you were asking about the application in different positions.
Yeah.
So you've seen where I like to do the bulk of the work just for the training of the motion into a position. Then we work into first position, second position, we'll be working just like first position. When you get higher, once you're third or fourth or higher, at least on the violin, you want to maintain contact here. You want to go. So it becomes familiar enough from what you've already been doing with third position. And when you get really high, I remember asking Mr. Swell, how do you vibrate way up high? He says, just shake everything. He was pretty much right. So at that point it's this, and that's okay, or you do a little of this. The other thing is when you're high, you don't want to bring the hand really curled up around it. You can have, so you don't have to go so high, and you'll even get a nicer vibrato because you get it onto this fatty pad. Now that is a very important secret that I didn't even put in here, but I'll share it. This is the secret to Perlman's vibrato. Seriously. He pulls look at his fingertips. They're tomatoes. Okay. Most of us don't have that padding. Men have, a little more padding because your fingers are broader than ours, but if you can access this fatty pad of the fingertip, it surrounds the string with a beautiful, fleshy pad. It cushions the sound. It makes it more beautiful. So if you ask a student who's playing a really melodic passage with vibrato just to pull the elbow back just a tiny bit, and you recall to them the Perlman sound, and you can even do a little role playing with them, but it is unbelievable. It frees the vibrato. It just opens it up, and they're like, I did that. Yeah, and you can choose to do that anytime you want, and I see this week after week. I use this in my sonata class. I used it last Saturday with 2 different kids who have very nice vibrato, but are still, they're 13 or 14 and they're opening up expressively, and suddenly it even freed the bow arm. It was amazing, this imaging, of this person. So that's one aspect of it, but the other is just the physicality. Your fingertip is a hard piece of cartilage and a little padding and a little callus, right? But right here is a nice fatty pad. It protects the cartilage as the nail does on the other side. And it offers us this wonderful place to just really sink in and warm it. So that's a nice one. And
By the way, interjection, Isaac Perlman is performing next Sunday, so we can all watch.
who watches tomatoes?
Recital
Oh,
Sunday.
where?
BSO at the.
Symphony? Oh, neat.
Take your binoculars.
That's right. So, referring back to the stupid story, keeping it slow and exaggerated, I think the ear is being trained always, as with any other skill. And as it goes faster, sometimes you can say to them in a piece, is that the vibrato you want to hear? And instead of saying, do it faster, do it slower, just ask them to image in the mind and go. And the amount of control that these exercises should build in over time should allow them to do that. So then it becomes more like, if you're speaking, you don't want someone to tell you where to put your inflections. You want to do it by ear. Well, that's going to be where this kicks in. So that's, it's more advanced, but I think one of the mistakes it's easy to make for all of us is to assume that kids aren't going to get it. And I'm always astounded at how smart they are and how sharp they are and how they can get this if asked to. So there's no reason not to dangle it in front of them. They might just bite. So all of these exercises work together, but the listening is the control mechanism. I like to tell them that I think it's the mind that plays the violin. These are the little slaves. I know I spoke about this when I did my organizational thing. The slaves really mean well. If the brain doesn't give them much direction, they'll go out and do it their way. They'll bludgeon their way through pretty much anything you ask them to. But if you want to do it your way, you have to offer guidance from here. You have to have a concept of sound, phrasing, intonation, whatever, and then leave them alone, because you can't micromanage them and let them do their job. Sometimes they have all the skills in the world and they just don't use it. You notice this? They need a little reminding. Are you on strike with vibrato today? Oh, no. Okay. It's just not necessarily what's in the mind at that moment. Also, recording at home is always great. We all know these things, but sometimes they don't. They all have all this amazing, they can take their phones and record themselves. It's astounding. So if they have a concept of sound, they're going to be able to execute that. Scale practice. I would like not to use it in scale practice most of the time. It's the most perfect way to shimmy yourself into a pitch. Anybody I know. And unfortunately, that can become very, very habitual. So even if they hit the right pitch, they shimmy out. And that is not useful. So that means the ear is not functioning. If you're working on using scales as a vehicle to teach vibrato creating the illusion of being continuous, which we really can't because we have to be on the pitch, leave the pitch, come back to it, but we can create the illusion. Then scales, note to note, that's fine, that's a different story. That's using a scale as a vehicle to teach another skill. And the wiggling into place. Often you see this in, they're doing arpeggios, right? And they shift up and it's all over the place and then they sort of settle. And then there's another shift and they're all over. Well, that's like if you're on the elevator and it goes up to the floor and does this for a while. So if they think of the position as a platform in which there is a collection of notes which are spaced at certain places. Okay, so we have an ever decreasing platforms and then increasing platforms. Then the shift the point is obviously that they want to hit the thing the first time, and that's where the slow practice comes in. I sometimes in evaluations when my kids go, they have to do their requisite arpeggios for piano, and they'll get the criticism, they're too slow. And I just sort of ignore it, because when they're in tune and they're ready, they'll be faster. Faster won't even be an issue, but right now, to me, accurate matters more than how fast they can grab. I've said everything I know. So if you have questions, comments, ideas, please, yeah.
Actually, I have always problem for the kids playing the vibrato was half note, like long note, but they start vibrating after a beat. Delayed.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips
The
for
crazy exercise. Because that's to start it. That's a starting
I
thing.
see, okay.
Yeah. So we all overuse that, I think, expressively.
I see.
The other thing is if you record them and they hear it and they say, ew, that's very, well, we would say it's mannered, predictable, and that's a big sin, right? But it's a, oh.
Okay, so we just have to keep telling them.
Again, well, it's about their concept of sound, so developing their concept of what that vibrato should sound like. They won't want to do that.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
I have a question, kind of for myself actually. When you're up really high,
Yeah.
your fourth finger, I've seen some violinists, a lot of violinists have this flexibility where the finger actually is really loose here.
Oh, wow.
And it's a really nice vibrato with the finger being flexible and supple, but I've never been able to get it myself. I usually just kind of get the whole hand going to vibrato way up there, fourth finger.
Well,
And it looks really nice. It sounds great too, and I'm wondering if there's anything
you know,
to
I'm
try.
not sure I would be able to answer that. My fourth finger's kind of short, and it, I mean, not terribly, but I remember Mr. Rosenblatt saying that nobody will give you a prize for using a fourth finger in a really treacherous place.
Yeah.
You know, just, does it sound good, then you get the prize, right? So
Yeah.
I tend to use more 3 up there because it, up there, especially at this angle, it's longer.
Yeah.
So I'm very practical about it. If I have to use 4, I can, but then I think my third is underneath it.
Can I ask you a question about that, Maria?
Yeah.
It might address what you're saying. So I do that same exercise you're doing, but I also do one where I was taught, which is really, I guess, more for finger, where you're round and collapse, and you
Yeah.
always, start in the pitch and always bend back.
Uh-huh.
But it's, I wonder if people do that, really to open up like every knuckle.
Yeah.
I mean, because,
Yeah.
if everything has to be loose from your fingertip to your
Well,
shoulder
I
blades
think
or
it sounds like
whatever.
a wonderful addition to this. The only thing
Because
is,
that, I
keeping
think,
it
helps the
soft.
pinky,
but you wanna keep this soft. I mean, if there's resistance,
Right.
if they
Right,
can do
you're just
this,
gonna
that's
roll
fine.
back,
Yeah.
so it's like you try to do it on the pad kind of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but I didn't know if you used
You know,
the other
I,
one instead.
no, there's no deliberate elimination of it. I think, it's probably my own lacuna. If you have, like, I started really late, so my hands were not, I didn't have 4-year-old flexibility at 20 or at 19, okay? So for me, that was not really doable. I mean, Mr. Cerrone gave me an exercise like that. He said, actually, what he suggested was to chin my finger on the fiddle, and I did that.
What did you call it?
Chinning it, I don't know. This is stupid. But just to do this, to develop that. Do you see, just
So
let,
you're going to the side one?
well, I'm just going down.
So you really lay down on the string.
Yeah, and it's very
Maybe
soft.
Swannick has a mountain and valley thing.
That's what I'm
But it's
doing.
Yeah,
not-
yeah,
So
yeah.
your finger's the mountain and then it turns.
The truth is, I think that's great, and I think whatever kids can do, there's a million exercises probably that I've never even dreamed of. What happened for me in developing this was, Mr. Cerrone had what he called the 7 easy steps to a perfect vibrato. And that was like, I had actually been working with his wife a few months before that, so that all made sense, and I worked hard at it. But then Ms. DeLay had things to add, Mr. Rosenblatt, and like all of us, we have these wonderful teachers. We accumulate, we make our own synthesis, we find out what works in our studio. But I think maybe for me, that was never really such a big option, so I sort of didn't go there, but I think it's a really, probably especially with
Can I-
kids being flexible.
Go ahead.
Well, I actually just wanted to ask
Yeah.
a question for all the teachers in general, like, I feel like so many students, it's like vibrato, even when they get good at it and it's even and relaxed, it's like becomes almost like a nervous tick. And so I'm always like, what is the function of vibrato? And, expressive tool is like the last answer. It's like, it's crazy. I'm like, well, because that's kind of the only expressive thing the left hand really does, unless you have a juicy shift or something. Everything else is from here. And they're just like, well, we just have to get it fast. It's like, I don't know where, but it drives me crazy because like in a fast passage, the vibrato, but then in some beautiful lyrical thing, it's like, okay. And then, you know what I mean? And I wonder how people sometimes address that. Like I do the same thing, no vibrato on scales unless they're slow.
Yeah.
Get rid of the, like the,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, I can't stop it now that I've learned it. It's involuntary. Like it's
Deborah, the question I'm gonna ask is actually related to this, which is, I wonder if you have any observations on what I would call remedial vibrato teaching, viola teaching, where they've come in and, I think this
Yeah.
often happens, where they've seen somebody else and they've,
kind of,
Yeah.
and it's partly a concept, either, oh, that looks fast, but they're so tight.
That's most of what I deal with, actually, because I only start a kid once in a while, but usually I'm like, okay, they've worked with somebody for a while and it's time to move. And
So you're, with them, you're just saying, okay, we're just starting
I start
over.
over, yeah. And what I'll say is, you may know some of this, I wanna be tactful, okay? But you need to free up, you need to ease it up, and I would hate to think you missed anything. And they don't wanna miss anything, so they're cool with that.
And if it's the other way
Around
around,
and it's-
also what you're saying about discussing it as an expressive tool, it's slight different thing than a skill. Well, you may have learned some of the skills, but in order to, I talk to them about having variety. Oh, good, okay, you can do it fast.
Right, so it's like an intention, so and that goes back to what you're saying, thinking and listening, not just like, lurching around. or
Yeah,
whatever.
what you said that really in my head was, it's inevitable, I can't stop it. That's time to start over, right?
Right, I mean,
That's scary.
hard. So, I mean, so then I'm like, if they're willing, and they usually are, cause
They're
they
there to
wanna
learn.
do it right, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you not let them, let's say, for a time, use the vibrato?
Yeah.
Because, I
I'll
don't
ask them
wanna
not
feel
to.
kinda mean, but do people, is that?
It's really hard. They're always being asked to audition for district or this or that, or an orchestra where having vibrato is part of the standard for being in that orchestra, right?
Yeah, but then
So
you're
then
just
I'll
like
say-
reinforcing all the tight stuff, and it's so hard to feel like
Yeah.
you're doing all this slow, careful work, so how do you
Well,
address that?
like right before the audition, I'll say, okay, you can use a little of that vibrato because it functions, but let's agree that when the audition's over, we'll just go back, 'cause you have to be practical.
Yeah.
But they get it. They get it, cause they're in the process. They've already invested time in the exercises. They don't wanna throw that away either. So what you said, I mean, that it reinforces the bad, they can get that. They can understand that too.
Well, it's a great reward once they get it, and
No
when they get
kidding.
it, they're psyched, but it's so hard sometimes when you're like, okay.
Do you know that every time I do the vibrato, rhythm plus opposite plus let go, and then they actually vibrate, I shake their hand, I say, congratulations. They think that's very funny, but it's a watershed moment. It really is. And once they got the taste of lobster, okay, so, yeah.
I tried once. I had a student come to me from someone else that had was more advanced and had a little bit of a tight vibrato, kind of small and tight. So I started, she was playing meditation.
Yeah.
And I had her just do everything very wide and slow for like 3 weeks. All the vibrato. I said it's gonna sound funny for a
Yeah.
while, but it really seemed to, to help her just open it up and free things. And then
This is
she's
deep
kind of
nature,
come
right?
to the middle, back to the
Yeah,
middle
yeah,
now,
okay.
where it's
So how about
regular.
this?
And she was doing that for 2 or 3 weeks, and
You
it
did a
started to
great
really
thing.
help.
Yeah, you did a great thing.
So hopefully it will sit
Yeah.
still.
Now, I never had anybody suggest to me that I would do that. That was something I started doing for myself. And at the time, I also had an adult student who was remedial, and I decided to introduce him to this, and it really helped him. So I think you tapped into something that's really good, and I didn't even include that, but that slow pulses on, I should have, and every time I work through one of these things, I'm gonna go home and rewrite it, I can tell you that. Just, tuck in a few more things, cause we all keep learning and rethinking. But,
And one of the
yeah.
things I've definitely
Yeah.
said to students is that it's easier, like if this is, not that it's so cut and dry, but if this is the goal of vibrato, it's actually much easier to get from too slow to here than it is, even if it looks closer. This is very hard, and from here to here is actually easier. You know what I mean? From getting from very slow up to a nice vibrato is great. From getting that too fast tight, even if it seems like it sounds closer to what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think there's
It's
something to
hard.
that. It sounds to them like it's vibrato,
Yeah.
like it's a function
I
of
think that's why
vibrato.
it's hard, because
Yeah.
they're like, oh look, I'm doing it. And you're like,
Okay, so this comes back to that originally, it was sort of come full circle in a nice way. That comes back to that term correct.
Mhm.
It's not correct because anybody says it. It's correct because it permits. What does it permit? Variety, as Joan pointed out. Expression. The personal scope, color, all of those things that we want out of the left hand. So if the vibrato is not able actually to produce those things, then it's not correct. And that's pretty much it. Also, as we as string players, we all work hard. Sometimes we work long hours. We really hurt, right? We're not using our muscles correctly. Sometimes we don't have any choice. We're just out there, and that's what we have to do. But correct, at least theoretically, if we were all built according to the perfect model for playing the violin, I suppose, would be we could play 12 hours a day and nothing would hurt. But, at least with the vibrato, we can try to train in some of this